So a few new faces jumped in, so I'll do the poll again. So how many have heard of Bayesian networks? Okay, great. How many have built Bayesian networks? Okay, a handful. And I asked the question up here, yours were machine learned Bayesian networks, were yours machine learned as well?
Yes.
Or were they hand built?
Machine learning.
Machine learned, okay. And Keith, you don't count, you're Booz Allen, so we know what you do. So we have a number of case studies that we'll walk through here. We'll do a deep dive into one case study that's specific to promotional campaign efficacy analysis. And I'll also do a little bit of background for everybody's benefit if you do decide to take back the idea that, hey, we should make an investment in Bayesian networks and train up a few of our analytics staff. So I'm happy to talk to that as well. And please interrupt and ask any questions along the way. So as I said earlier, Bayesian networks and the hands in the room, having heard of Bayesian networks but not yet fully applied them, that's, I think, pretty consistent with what we see in that they're very powerful, but they are computationally expensive. They're theoretically sometimes difficult to understand, especially since the majority of folks coming out of a math, stats, or OR curriculum are trained as frequentists, traditionally not Bayesian statisticians. And furthermore, the machine learning, so machine learned BBNs and the tools and metrics associated with them are largely in the school of information theory, not statistics. So most of the Bayesian network developers in the world, especially the software platform developers, come from computer science, artificial intelligence backgrounds, not statistics and operations research. So it's not a big surprise that it's not widespread in the community, but we think that there's tremendous potential, especially as we start to tackle problems in a predictive setting that are really highly dimensional. Even the simple problem of all of you deciding to come to this session as opposed to a competing session was driven by multiple factors. Driven by, obviously, the core factors of, are you physically still going to be at the conference, which is a challenge end of day, Tuesday. But there's a title to this conference, to this track. There's a title to this talk. There are competing titles to competing tracks and competing talks. There's also how you feel based on exactly what you ate at lunch. And I might be a little snoozy and want to take a nap. So I can't necessarily pinpoint one factor, one causal factor that drives you into this talk. It's a highly dimensional problem. So predicting it, therefore, requires a tool that can leverage many dimensions. So that's a quick overview of why we care about Bayesian networks. I'll get into now what are Bayesian networks. Oh, and let me start again with this metric I like to put up. In this world of where, in highly dimensional problems where we'd like to pinpoint why a customer makes a decision that they make, why we make a decision we make. Increasingly, the data to track what I ate for lunch and how I'm feeling right now and how active my email account is and my mobile device, all of that is increasingly being collected, not necessarily by one entity, but it is being collected. So as we move down the paradigm of increasing data variety being produced at increasing speeds and obviously increasing volumes, as we hear a lot about, the ability to inform a prediction based on all of those, the sensor network, all of those inputs is only growing. So I like to put the fact up that 90% of the world's data was created in the past 2 years. What's even more intriguing and mind-boggling to me is that that metric's expected to hold true in another 2 years. So, and much of that data is unstructured. What this means to me is the ability to harness a variety of sensor data and a variety of behavioral data, and a variety of weather data elements in driving real-time decisions in very high speed, requires a shift in the analytics paradigm, that we're not just doing things forensically, looking back in time, trying to fit an autoregressive model on clean relational data sets. But instead, I need the flexibility to be able to to draw inference from thousands of data points or thousands of variables. And I like the tool Bayesian Networks. We traditionally talk about data miners as producing Snapple cap facts. Has anyone heard this analogy? So, real fact number 855, animals that lay eggs do not have belly buttons. That's great. What the hell am I going to do with that information? That doesn't actually, I mean, I can't draw action from that. I can identify a correlation. We all know the debate between correlation and causation. It's not necessarily can I draw causation from a data set that I have, which in this case, there is causation. The real challenge we face as an analytics community is becoming, data scientists, who are inquisitive and curious enough to ask questions why or how, and to go identify the data sets that will give me that answer. So Bayesian networks have been described as causal networks in that their ability to, paired with expert input, actually inform the causal direction of influence, not just correlation, is a very powerful tool. That, together with a few other attributes that I think we'll talk through the course of the next half hour, make them an extremely powerful tool. So let me start with a very simple example before I dive into case studies on the future potential of where we see the big data paradigm. And we love the newest thing in big data is to hate the term big data. I've heard more references to hating the word big data and disagreeing with its definition than I have the actual word big data at this conference, which is great. It means we're moving past this label, but I think what it does is nicely summarize that there is a paradigm shift happening, and our analytical techniques need to evolve with them. So, baseball cards. Who when they were children or have children that have seen baseball cards? So what's on the back of a baseball card? The front's a picture, typically. You get some stats. And what are the stats?
Batting average, home runs.
Batting average, home runs, and it's by season.
By season team.
Right, so year by year by year. So they're very periodic. And when are they produced? How recent would a baseball card be?
This year.
Last year, right? You have to basically finish the season, or you can have an in season, but that's rare. So they're highly periodic. What decisions would I, as a general manager or a coach, drive from those types of insights? Periodic, runs batted in over the last 10 years, or batting average. Consistency. So would I make a real decision? Would I throw money down on the line and say, here's your contract, name your favorite?
Moneyball.
Well, so Moneyball, it's good, you're jumping ahead. Moneyball's already living in this central column. So Moneyball's about what's the likelihood of being able to get an on-base percentage. The statistics that are used, that are referenced on the phone, when you're watching a game by the analysts, statistics that were used in Moneyball, statistics used by franchises, by scouts, are definitely not as periodic. They're higher fidelity. You get per inning, per at-bat type statistics. You certainly know, by left hand against opposing left-hand pitcher versus right-hand pitcher. So you actually get bidimensional bivariate in most cases. So you can at least start to infer. I can make decisions about, is a player trending upwards or downwards enough to decide whether I need to train them a certain way, retire them, renew a contract, and that's where that's where we live today. The future, inevitably, and we're already seeing this in a retail sector, the future in sports could actually be decision support, where I want to predict the next likely pitch. I want to predict the likelihood of getting on base given, conditional on, a bunt versus taking a pitch, assuming you'll get walked. So that is the future, where I want a real-time prediction to inform me as a coach or a player the decision that I take is the future. Now, how do we get that prediction? It depends on so many things, and our minds as analysts immediately jump to why you could never predict that. There's so many unobservables. positioning of the sun. You know, the player had an argument with his family 3 hours ago. There's so many unobservables, but again, we have to embrace the fact and accept the fact that we are moving towards an environment where more and more of that data is becoming available. So the ability to take a play-by-play type of perspective rather than a year-by-year, season-by-season, or even game-by-game perspective is pretty powerful. And we're already seeing data sources like Stats is a company in Chicago that produces SportView data. SportView provides, I think it's 20 frames per second, very high fidelity, positional data for every player on the court, the 3 refs, and the ball. That level of precision of positional data allows you to do amazing things, forensically and predictively. So again, and there's going to be a huge market for the industry players that can produce and sell and resell in a quick fashion this type of data, positional data of the sun relative to the player. So let me quickly run through some case studies. Again, the premise here is highly dimensional problems. We recently built a model that predicts delays for individual flights, and it can be used beginning months in advance, months before the flight. Obviously, my confidence in my answer months before the flight, when I have a limited data set, is not nearly as strong as it is day of operations. But the goal is, simple an analogy, if I have a flight schedule published 6 months, or I have typically a flight schedule published 1 year out, I know the day of week, I know the month of year, I typically know the aircraft type at the publishing of the schedule, and I know obviously the origin airport and the destination airport. 5 data points, and I know more, but 5 data points. If I know nothing else, I can at least be better than average in my estimate for what's my likely delay going to be on that day. So when you go to kayak.com and you're about to book a flight, you'll see a historical average. That is a historical average for that flight, looking over a 12-month trailing average. But why not benefit from the fact that we know it's on a Monday, and that we know that it's January as opposed to June? So again, it's about decomposing these point value estimates that we all rely on as consumers into what's really driving the differences within that curve. Okay, so case study number 2, asset management. Estimate the reliability of thousands of assets when I have sparse information on individual assets. So we have a client that has about 35,000 unstaffed assets around the country. They know a lot about roughly 1,000 of those assets, meaning they're checked in periodically, there are maintenance crews that visit and report logs, they understand the actual maintenance spend and what activities were done on it. They keep those records very clean for about 1,000 of 35,000 assets. For the remainder, they know very little. They may know the build year, they may know the location, hopefully, but they may not have very active logs on power consumption, on whether there's a cooling unit associated with the asset. So the ability to produce an estimate of reliability for an asset that's sitting on a mountaintop in Montana that no one's visited in 4 years, but it looks a little bit like pieces of those 1,000 assets that I know a lot about, is actually quite powerful. I need to be able to produce an estimate even where I don't have complete evidence. So that's kind of a key relaxing assumption of Bayesian networks when you're comparing it to your classical approaches, let's say a linear regression model, where you've got, let's say, 10 explanatory variables determined to be the most important in explaining your dependent variable. When I want to use that in a predictive setting, I better have an input for every single one of those 10 inputs, for every single one of those 10 explanatory variables. If I'm missing one, I have to throw the data point away. I can't train with that data point, and I certainly can't predict with that data point. So I can't impute missing values is kind of our key. I can do it outside the regression, of course, but I can't train the regression using non-imputed values. I need to first impute values. So that is another sort of major benefit of the flexibility and dynamic of a network which relies so much on the covariates between my explanatory variables, and I don't assume that they are all independent of one another. It's a very important relaxing assumption. Very rarely in real life do we see complete independence of all of our explanatory variables, let alone normal distributions of their error terms. I mean, that's pretty unlikely. So another great relaxing assumption that we enjoy when using a Bayesian network. Another case study, predicting market shares in hypothetical markets. If I don't have evidence for a market that I've served or a competitor has served, or it's a new product that's never been launched, I need to somehow produce an estimate of its performance. I could use expert judgment, and that's often what we do. We use expert input to develop some distributions, some expectations, some heuristics around what our expected returns are going to be, adoption rates, penetration rates. But if I can actually learn from the masses of historically what's been done with across, let's say, hundreds of products, and the new product I launch has similar attributes and similar addressable markets of a collection, let's say little bits and pieces of the hundreds that I have, I can piece together a theoretical market and a theoretical product from the thousands I have already generated evidence for. So yet another great benefit of crowdsourcing and machine learning a Bayesian network. And similarly, estimate consumer retail. We recently did a project, estimate the likelihood of defection of individual customers. So again, my ability to attract a customer, my ability to drive revenue from an individual customer is as highly dimensional as the decision of a customer to leave my company, my bank, my loyalty program, my gym membership. There's a lot of factors at play. So again, the ability to benefit from the covariance between my explanatory factors is actually quite important in filling in the things I don't know about my typical customer. So I'm going to pause here for a quick second and see if anybody who's heard of the Monty Hall problem? So about half. So Monty Hall, I know the majority of you have heard of Bayesian networks but haven't seen them in practice. So I was going to jump out of this for a second and actually build a Bayesian network that shows the Monty Hall problem in practice, if that's beneficial. So this is the Monty Hall problem. And the Monty Hall problem is a actual perfect, it's a perfect demonstration of Bayes' law, Bayes' theorem, which who remembers Bayes' theorem from way back in stats class? So this is Bayes' theorem here. So ultimately what we're after is what we call the posterior probability of event A given evidence E. And it's a function of the prior probability of event A, the likelihood of evidence given event A occurring, and this normalizing factor, which is called the pre-posterior probability of the evidence by itself. So ultimately, what we're looking to do is to update through the application of evidence E, and not just one single node, but evidence across my network, the likelihood that event A will happen or event A is true. And you can envision a Bayesian network you saw a picture of earlier as being a system of these equations. So every additional piece of evidence updates my overall likelihoods, my overall probability. So the Monty Hall problem is around, so three doors. A contestant comes in, Monty Hall says, stand in front of the door that you think has a car in front of it, behind it, sorry. The other two have nothing behind them. Or we often say an animal, say a donkey is behind two of the doors and the car is behind one of the doors. And you assume the contestant's rational and they want the car. So Monty Hall says, stand in front of the door, has the car. So let's say the contestant stands in front of door number 1. And so there are two doors left, doors 2 and 3. And Monty Hall says, let's make a deal. I'm going to open one of the other two doors, revealing a donkey. I'm giving you a freebie. Let's say opens door number 3 and there's a donkey behind it. So now there are 2 doors left. Are you better off statistically switching your answer to door number 2 or sticking with your original answer, door number 1? So who thinks it's stick with your gut, your original choice? Who thinks it's switch to door number 2? All the people who've heard the riddle before. And who thinks it doesn't make a difference, it's 50-50? Okay. So you guys would just be standing there, not making a decision. You have to make a choice. So the answer is you're better off switching to door number 2. And the reason is Monty Hall has full awareness of what's behind each of the doors. It's not a random selection. So the opening of door number 3 is the application of new evidence that says half of your originally wrong answer, your non-choice, is no longer on the table. So if I had originally picked correctly as a contestant,
but he deliberately opened door, empty, door was empty.
right, so Monty Hall will, by definition, always open a door that has a donkey behind it.
Okay.
It's an important rule because it's real evidence. Monty Hall knows truth. Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
So what's the likelihood that the contestant originally picked the correct door?
1 in 3.
1 in 3. So what's the likelihood he originally picked incorrectly? 2 1/3. So if the contestant originally picked incorrectly, no matter what, if he or she decides to switch, he'll end up with the right answer, correct? Because Monty Hall gave you the freebie. So if you originally picked incorrectly, no matter what, you will always win, and you switch. If you originally picked correctly and switch, you will lose. So given the likelihood is that he originally picked incorrectly is 2/3, it's more likely than he had originally picked correctly. So therefore switching has a higher likelihood because I have that additional increment of new evidence given to me. So, by the way, and I put this up here too, when the problem first appeared in Parade, 10,000 readers, including 1,000 PhDs, wrote in claiming the solution was wrong. So if you don't believe it, it feels unnatural. There's 2 doors. It's really still 50-50. You're not alone. I know everyone has skeptical eyes in the room saying this guy's crazy. So here's the Bayesian network. We'll model quickly. So I'm gonna build 3 nodes, and these are the 3 sort of decision criteria, 3 unknowns. One is, can everybody see this? All right, I'll read it out to you. Contestant choice. And the possible states are door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3. Does everyone agree with that? And what's my likelihood distribution of the contestant picking any of those 3?
1/3.
1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Everybody see that? Okay. Second state is the car. Where's the car? The car can have, again, 3 states. Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. And what's the likelihood of the car being behind any door? 1/3, right? And these are independent of one another, right? We agree on that? Well, in a Bayesian framework, they're conditionally independent on one another. The third node here, I'll explain what that means, is Monty's reveal. Which door is Monty going to open? Again, door 1, door 2, door 3. But in this case, which door Monty reveals is dependent upon the door the contestant chose. He's not going to open a door the contestant chose. And where the actual car is, he's also not going to open a door where the car is behind him. So that's what these edges, these links refer to. So in this case, I end up with a joint probability table, which says, given the contestant chose door number 1, Monty will not reveal door number 1. Does everyone agree with that? So I put zeros in those 3 cells. Given door number 2 the contestant chooses, he will not reveal 2. And given door number 3, he will not reveal 3. Everyone agree with those zeros? Okay. Given the contestant chooses door number 1 and the car is behind door number 2, Monty will not reveal door number 2. Do we agree with that rule? Okay. And the same thing with 3 and 3. So you're basically just filling in the diagonals here with where Monty will not open a door. I'm going to cross my diagonals. So I should expect that if the contestant chooses door number 1 and the car is behind door number 1, what's the likelihood Monty would reveal 2 or 3? 50-50. It's the same. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to auto-complete, normalize this. I get 50-50 in that circumstance. Given the contestant chooses 1, the car is behind 2, Monty will, with 100% of the time, choose open door number 3. So all I've done is populate the rules, no magic here. So now I go into what's called validation mode here in our Bayesian lab program. And again, contestant choice, Monty reveal, car. So what was our situation? Currently, without any information in the system, everything's equally likely, 1/3. Now the contestant's chosen door number 1. Still equally likely that the car is behind 1, 2, and 3. That hasn't changed. But given Monty's knowledge of truth, and this is what conditionally independent means, I am now going to update the likelihood for where the car is based on the application of evidence to Monty's reveal. So these two actually become conditionally independent of each other through their parent, Monty reveal, this node. So contestant chooses door number 1, Monty reveals door number 2. It is now 2/3 likely that the car is behind door number 3, and 1/3 likely it was originally door number 1. So no simulation here, there's no Monte Carlo, it's based purely on joint probability tables. And it's an important concept. Again, just because you see it here doesn't mean that you can instinctively trust the storyline, but I assure you it is true, it's the case. So let me go back to the presentation. So in the case of a global hotel chain, Booz Allen was engaged to estimate the true investment return of a promotional campaign. So anyone who's in the marketing and advertising and consumer space knows that one of the hardest things to do is to attribute revenue or some objective to a particular ad spend or a particular ad or promotion. Because it's hard to isolate the specific contribution in the inclusion, I should say, of all other changes, all other variables that are going on at the same time. So we proposed Bayesian Networks as the ability to isolate the contribution of a customer being treated with a promotion, holding everything else constant, which again is in truth impossible to do. I cannot have a customer who's 27 years old, who lives in New Jersey, who has this degree, 43 nights spent at this hotel over the course of the last 12 months. I cannot replicate that person everywhere in the country. I cannot replicate that person with a promotion and without a promotion. I can't have a perfect control group that controls for everything. But with statistical matching and likelihood matching, I am able to create this theoretical person and force everybody who did not receive a promotion to receive a promotion, and force everyone who did not receive a promotion to receive one. So that was the premise. Let me give you a few numbers on the control and treatment group. For this promotion, there were 110,000 customers that were treated and 62,000 in a control group that were determined to be lookalikes, sufficient lookalikes to the treatment group. And we'll come back to that concept of a control group later. And within that treatment group, 60,000 accepted the promotion and roughly 50,000 declined the promotion or never signed up for the promotion. And the question was, how many incremental nights did the promotion itself drive for each customer? So traditional approach that the hotel and frankly most market research retailers, most promotion-heavy firms will use a traditional approach where you have top-down ROI. I have a treatment group, I have a control group. I trust that my control group looks similar to my treatment group, so any deviation between the two, I attribute to my promotion. Because my control group did not get treated and my treatment group did get treated. And so you end up with a series of beta coefficients attached to each of my attributes, my explanatory variables, but I have one beta coefficient that treats my entire population. That's a fundamental limitation and weakness because I'm aggregating over my population to give you a point estimate beta. The bottom-up approach is let's calculate the return on investment of each individual and determine what the ROI is by adding up the individuals, not looking at the cohorts top-down. So this is an example, this is actually the model framework. This is the model we care about. I'm interested in what is the likelihood that a particular customer would register for a promotion, and multiplied by what's the impact of them registering. So what is the number of incremental nights that I'm going to drive for a customer that is in the promotional campaign, and then of course I have to weight that by what's the likelihood they'd register in the first place. That's what this term is. So this differential is the expected number of nights given that they registered, the delta against number of nights that they did not register, but they would have registered if given the promotion, because we need to, again, control that these are the same types of people. It's not that they didn't register because they would never accept the promotion. We need the same person who ended up registering to not register. Statistically, it feels uncomfortable because we need to have a data point that shows this occurred. But in reality, we don't need that data point. We can crowdsource the data point, so to speak. So we had a treatment group offered but declined the promotion. We had a treatment group offered to register for the promotion. We ran a hard classifier, or we trained, I should say, hard classifier, ensemble, decision tree out of Booz for random forest, support vector machine linear model, neural network, and then did a majority voting scheme to determine and then apply a hard classifier to the control group. Meaning, I have a control group, I'm going to send them all through my classifier and give me just a likelihood that they would have registered. And determining a likelihood of registering is a much easier thing to predict than what's the impact given that they registered. So we want to use that information to treat our two BBNs here. One is a BBN likelihood of participation, which is going to become this value here, and a BBN value for incremental nights, which is this term right here. So I'm going to skip a few of these right now. Let me talk quickly about the data set. The data set, we had 5 different data sets that gave us insight into the properties, the member stays, the specific stays, as well as general occupancy rates for facilities themselves. So roughly 5 gigabytes of data, something on the order of 15 million records, if I'm not mistaken. And our goal was to not build an expert BBN, but to have everything trained empirically, so have a machine learned BBN. So we would not influence or introduce any human bias into the model. Discretization, if this were more of a BBN audience, I'd say we should talk about the nuances of why you would use a particular discretization algorithm. But I'll pause here by saying that discretization is an important and sometimes controversial step in Bayesian network design. Any continuous variable which would be treated in a regression through integration, you actually have to bin and create a discrete variable from it. So computationally, that's an important, it's an important relaxing assumption that allows us to actually produce these networks on relatively reasonable computational time. There are a number of supervised Machine learning techniques, again, I won't go into the individual nuances, but I will say that it's important to run multiple techniques and then compare, contrast your models against one another to get the best explanatory power, just like any other model. So the final answer was in a classical approach, as we expected, would overestimate return on investment. Because again, you're treating everyone as an average. And so when I use that single beta coefficient for my entire population, I don't hold constant the other explanatory factors which may be driving my incremental mites. I can only hold constant a certain number of them in my regression model. So we expected that there would be an overestimation, and the true contribution of a promotion is going to be a fraction or a portion of what is traditionally estimated. So the top-down approach estimated that 1.7 incremental nights were driven by the promotional campaign, on average, across the cohort, which, when multiplied by our average room rate, led to an estimation of $16.4 million in total ROI for the campaign. Using likelihood matching, which isolates the particular node associated with was a customer treated or not, while holding everything else constant. Again, it's a theoretical concept. We estimate the true promotional campaign to have driven 1.3 incremental nights, again, on average. And keep in mind that we actually have an estimate for each named individual. So instead of using a room average, I'm able to use the specific average for that named customer and aggregate up the ROI based on $10.6 million being the total comparison, 10.6 against 16.4. So the classical approach overestimates by roughly 35% in this particular case, and we expect that would be different by different promotional campaign. Go ahead.
To this point, I think a natural step, next step would be kind of to look at different clusters in those groups,
right,
and do kind of targeting where you get the best return.
Right. So you beat me to it, and let me say one thing before I jump into how you use this in practice. So this is, again, all backwards look. The campaign already ran. That's great. It's a sunk cost at this point. How do I use this to drive future decisions? So the first premise is that that control group that I mentioned is not something you actually need in your experimental design if there's sufficient variability in your treatment group. I can find someone in my treatment group that did not, let's say, a global offer that everybody sees. Everyone was treated. Who's my treatment group there? Well, if I have sufficient variability in that treatment group, I can create a control group out of my treatment group. Right? If I have, let's say I have a data set of car accidents, I can treat a certain type of car accident as my objective, and a car accident of a different type can act as a proxy for that type of car accident, head-on collision, for example. So it's the same concept here. Not including a control group is actually a huge revenue generator, because these are customers that we define look alike the treatment group. So they're probably some of my savviest, highest spend customers. By restricting the promotion from them, you're leaving revenue on the table. So in this case, the opportunity cost of including a control group in the experimental design was over $5 million. Go ahead.
Do you have the accuracy of both approaches?
So we're predicting the past here. So we have your classic adjusted R-squared metric and a minimum description length score for the BBN, and both are within. So the MDL BBN is within the same predictive power of the top-down approach. The difference is we want to use this type of an approach for driving future decisions. And so I can't trust a closed form 8-variable model as being a future predictor, a perfect predictor of my future campaigns that are going to vary quite a bit. So we almost don't over-rely on the MDL score or the R-squared score because we realize in this case we're fitting and predicting the past. I want to look at relative revenue generation between making a decision. Do I send a promotion to this person or not? The true value in terms of predicting is important, but we don't know what truth is anyway. No statistical technique would know exactly what truth is. We want to know relative predictability. So this is the final takeaway, and I'll close with this, is that the bottom-up approach applies evidence for every single one of my named customers. Gender, age, location, stay patterns, how many different properties do I go to, or do I go to the same property over and over and over again? All of these attributes are captured in my network, which means I can produce an estimate for ROI for each individual customer because I can actually capture the differences between them. So the bottom-up approach gives me an ROI for every single one of my named customers, and here are the scrubbed number identifiers for each of my customers. And the word map here is really for visual effect, but you can rank order the return on investment, the incremental return that you would get for this specific promotion and its specific attributes for this specific customer. And think about email targeting or promotion targeting. I'm going to stop going down the list. I'm going to email everybody from top down, and I'm going to stop when I no longer get, let's say, $100 of incremental revenue per person. Because everybody else I risk alienating, everybody else I risk clicking unsubscribe, and then I never have access to them again. So how do I convert this to a cluster? I don't want to convert it to a cluster. Today we have 7, 8 customer groups, and we decide based on some predictive model that I'm going to send an email campaign or a promotional campaign to clusters 1, 5, and 9. And within that cluster, I've got a lot of people I'm going to alienate, and I will have missed my high impact customers in clusters 3, 4, and 5, for example. So we use these clusters in order to aggregate and make generalizations about decisions we need to make. But again, going back to that future paradigm, we can make decisions on an individual level, and we can do them very quickly. I could aggregate it up when I need to make decisions about, let's say, media buys. Where do I put up billboards? Where do I do mailing, flyer mailing? I could do that on a regional level just by simply plotting the individual, and we aggregate up rather than aggregating down. And then I could also focus on flows. Where are my customers originating? Where are they traveling to? And I might tailor design my promotion to be effective for only certain origin destination pairs, because my highest return customers, meaning not those who spend the most, but those that will spend much more given a promotion, travel between these flows, northeast, southwest, whatever it might be. So I can aggregate up and make decisions and cluster to the point earlier to get to the tactical decisions I need to make, but let's not start by aggregating our data set and looking down. Let's start by building up from the bottom. So that's all I had, and I'll be around. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we got only a couple minutes left.